Hola, Culers. Welcome to another stream here. Today I got my boy Elias from the Kool-Aid podcast. How are you, my friend?
Thank you again for the introduction. Absolutely happy to be here. And I'm super excited to talk about some Barca news. I know you have a lot that you do want to discuss, and I'm super happy to be here.
Yeah, dude, it's the first time. I think this is actually my fourth real live stream because I did a couple that were just really hit and miss. And finally,
Okay.
you're here, and I'm glad you're making your debut. And I'm going to leave your name on the title so everybody can go subscribe to your
Perfect.
channel, guys. But hey, let's get started. The first topic right off the bat, there's plenty of news from Barca right now that I'm just really excited to talk about. And the first thing I want to talk about is Deco. And the reason why I want to about Deco is that the story came out about John Garcia joining Barcelona, and I want to get your
Mm-hmm.
thoughts on him. But
Okay.
before we do that, I do want to take it to this place because there's been a lot of talk about Deco not doing his job, and there's like this fan base is really
Mm-hmm.
divided between Barcelona fans that like him and there's Barcelona fans that don't like him. I
Okay.
personally think he's doing a great job, and that the story that came out was that he had a meeting or a lunch with John Garcia and his girlfriend, and he pitched. Basically, he made a pitch to him, right? He telling me what the game plan is and what we are wanting to. Why are we adding John Garcia to Barcelona? And just a couple days later, he decided to join Barca, even though he wanted to join for his ideal spot was Newcastle for him. So, what are your thoughts, real quick, before we get into John Garcia, just about Deco in general?
Well, first I'm gonna give my thoughts on Joan Garcia as a signing. I
Yeah.
think this is an absolutely fantastic signing. We are signing one of the best goalkeepers, in La Liga. He had an absolutely excellent season last season, and we talked about it before on my channel. You know my opinions on Ter Stegen. I think he's a player who has added a lot to Barcelona, but every season that has gone by, you've seen his performances decline, and it was a long time coming that Barcelona they needed a replacement in the goalkeeper position, and I think Joan Garcia. Looking at the options out in the market, when you're looking at the price tag, the release cost, I think it's a fantastic market opportunity. I think this is a move that Barcelona they should explore. And in regards to Deco, I know that the Barcelona fan base they are split on him. Some people they see him as incompetent. I know that I've been very critical of Deco at times, and I would say I have sort of a neutral opinion on Deco because at times he can, be right on the head. He hit the nail on the head. For example, Juan Garcia bringing him in, understanding that Barcelona they need something new in that goalkeeper position, recognizing that Juan Garcia should be the right move. But at the same time, I'm looking at some of the names that we're being linked with. For example, why is Luis
Hmm.
Diaz our number one priority? We've seen just the performances that Nico Williams, for example, can give for I would say half the amount of money that you would pay, and overall the signings that we were also linked, and you're thinking, for example, the Roque signing that wasn't able to come into fruition necessarily, and so I'm a little bit torn on Deco. I'm not, for example, like out there like bashing and saying, "Hey, Deco out, Deco out, Deco out." But I am skeptical of some of the stuff that he does, and we just have to see how the summer develops in order to necessarily say, "Hey, this season or this summer transfer window has been a success or not." I think Deco. I think he's been what here for like a year or so, in
Yeah,
general.
yeah. I
Okay.
think it's yeah. So, but to me, honestly, what I do think though, there's a few things. I think he does a good job as far as what he's supposed to do, which is kind of like the depth of the team and kind of like the squad, right? But when it comes to him saying a lot of things, I think he leaks a lot of stuff, and I
He
also
talks.
think that he just speaks a lot. The more you
Yeah.
talk, the more mistakes you're going to make. I really hated the comment that he made on goalkeeping. Like he said he doesn't know anything about goalkeepers and he really that's a
Yeah.
spot that he doesn't know. So like those are the things that you really shouldn't say. But at the end of the day, dude, he had that meeting with John Garcia, and ultimately, I think it's really underrated, and nobody really talks about him or give him credit when it comes to getting the signings done that he's supposed to get. Like I give him a lot of credit for,
Hmm.
a lot of times we take it for granted, right? The fact that Lamine Yamal resigned, Kubarsi, Gavi, Pedri, basically even Araujo, who was actually leaving the club. Like some of us
Uh-huh.
would have loved that he left, right? But at the end of the day, like he still convinced him to stay. He convinced him to sign a contract, and ultimately, if he ends up leaving, we're gonna make money out of that deal if he leaves. So those are the things that I think that Deco doesn't really get much credit for. But now, do you think that this addition for John Garcia, though, do you think that that makes the defense better? Because I think that that's something that it's easy to say, right? Oh, okay, we have a good goalkeeper, but at the end of the day, I feel like he makes the defense so much better, just in the sense that he led the league in interception for crosses, and we always struggle with those kind of crosses. So I think he instantly makes the defense better. But what are your thoughts on that kind of aspect of him?
I mean, you were talking about like Joan Garcia's stats. You were talking about his percentage in aerial duels, for example, and his ability to come out and stop those crosses. And that's an area that Barcelona they've been lacking, I would say, for many years. For example, you just go to our recent game against Inter, in the Champions League, where we struggled in those set pieces necessarily. If we had a keeper that was commanding in that area necessarily, we could have avoided some of those goals. But just I go into this mindset where we have a breath of fresh air. We've seen Ter Stegen for so many years at Barcelona, and when Chesney came in, you saw the difference. You saw the impact that he was able to bring. And this is a Chesney that is in 36, way past
Hmm.
his prime, a keeper that's coming out of retirement. And he had a fantastic period for first, I would say 12 to 20 games necessarily. And of course, it's understandable that he's not going to be the best goalkeeper in the world. He was literally retired, a couple months ago, and then he was just thrown back into the swing of things. And when I look at that, I'm super excited to have John Garcia there. Not only, for example, his percentages for the amount of crosses that he can stop, for the saves that he can make, but also just something new there. Like after so many years, you want to see something
10
new.
years.
Exactly, 10 years at the club, you just want someone different. You want someone who can just adds a whole new aspect necessarily to that position. Basically a revamp, and I'm super super excited to see what John Garcia can bring.
Yeah, and that really just brings me to my next point, because I feel like having somebody who is more committed, somebody who is motivated, not that Ter Stegen is not motivated, but I feel like there's a sense of entitlement that I'm sensing with him, and that brings me to my next point, which is Ter Stegen, right? And the
Yeah,
saga that we're about to, face with the fact that, some of those news that are coming out. Apparently Barcelona or Deco kind of wants to, or I don't know if they offered him or not, but the story was that he's being offered a year's worth of salary for an exchange of terminating the contract, because Barcelona
yeah,
doesn't want to have that contract anymore. So they kind of
no,
want to offload it, and they're willing to pay a year's worth of salary. And the story was that he's sticking to his guns and say, I want to get paid for my full contract. Like basically,
yeah,
Barcelona kind of forcing him to leave, and he's kind of forcing his way in, and Barcelona kind of it's gonna want to force him out, and he's gonna want to force
yeah.
himself in. So at the end of the day, like, what are your kind of like your thoughts on Ter Stegen? Because to me, I think it's a little bit entitled, and especially that story that came out of him going to Deco and telling him that basically because he was coming back from injury, he
Yeah.
was expecting to be registered for the Champions League. To me, that was the Lulu.
No, first, I take all those like sort of reports with a grain of salt, because I don't want to come out like on my channel and say, hey, hey, Ter Stegen attitude horrible, 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 and then a couple weeks later, Ter Stegen comes out into the media and says, hey, this is completely false, or more reports coming out that says, hey, this isn't true. So I take those reports with a grain of salt, but I can see where they're coming from. I can see
Yeah.
those reports being credible, because you've seen Ter Stegen over the past. In 2015, 2016, he demanded Claudio Barlow's exit and him being the starter. Oh, it seems we get just left. But continue my conversation. In regards to Ter Stegen, I think Ter Stegen at this point, you could be upset with him demanding to be the number one goalkeeper
Hmm.
after what an amazing I would say what 3 months under Chesney. Why would you demand to be the starting goalkeeper and demand his unregistration from the Champions League and mess up what has been going on. Why cause, those issues? Why create turmoil in the dressing room when you have such a big game coming up? That's not the right environment, and it's completely understandable why Hansi Flick got upset. And after that, that made him decide, hey, you know what? Ter Stegen out, and that's not even to talk about his performances,
Yeah.
because in this performances, I see a lot of people making excuses for him, saying, "Oh, he's coming back from injury." No, Ter Stegen has been declining season upon season upon season. Just look at the games that he's played this season, even before his injury. Just go against Monaco in the Champions League. In the first
Yeah.
game that we played in the Champions League, he was at fault for the goals that we conceded. Just look at that. And so, in regards to Ter Stegen attitude, I I want to believe that because honestly, I want Ter Stegen out, but at the same time, I take it with a grain of salt because I want to be fair. I don't want to say, hey, this is true, and just bash him when it isn't. I want to give some respect to him, but in general, I think Barcelona they made the right move going for Joan Garcia, just getting a goalkeeper and just moving on necessarily.
And it kind of looked like there was that video that came out with Laporta and Flick kind of talking about why
Yeah.
isn't Ter Stegen wanting to be part of the celebration, right? Like, what the hell, bro? Like, it's like they couldn't believe it. And at the end of the day, I think that's one of the reasons why Hansi Flick it's moving on from Ter Stegen, and
Yeah.
I don't. Hansi Flick doesn't strike me of a guy who's really patient with players. I think that he's the type of guy who it has it's set on his ways, and whether you follow him or not, if you don't follow, then that's going to be a problem. And I think that Hansi Flick has a really great group of guys right now, and everybody's buying in to where like if it feels like, for example, like Ter Stegen is not buying in, especially him being a
Mm-hmm.
captain and not being there with the team celebration and trying to be part of it and speak up. He's the number one captain for God's sake. And at the
Yeah.
end of the day, that was a really bad look on him. And that's again, we go back to the same thing. Like to me, some people don't think that Ter Stegen could be a legend. The fact that he was there for 10 years and he was part of something special, something that Real Madrid has never done, which is winning a treble in
Yeah.
2015. To me, that makes him a legend. And to me, a legend just kind of means I'm not too literal with the sense. To me, a legend is will I forget that you were part of this squad, right? And I
Okay.
don't think Ter Stegen, after playing for so long for Barcelona, I don't think I'm gonna forget like his time with Barca. So to me,
Okay.
that makes him a legend. But ultimately, it's gonna end really ugly from
Okay.
from what I'm seeing. I don't know what your thoughts are on
No,
what.
in regards to that, for example, like you're talking about the definition of a legend. Would you say a legend is someone who's created history at the club
Yeah,
necessarily? Because you don't need to be at Barcelona for long to necessarily create or become a legend necessarily.
right.
You create a key goal, a key moment in the club's history, and then you're up in that side. And so I can understand why some people want to refer to Ter Stegen as a club legend. He's been here for 10 years. He's won multiple trophies with Barcelona. He's won the UCL. He's won the treble. He was vital in that win. And so I don't bash people. Personally, I don't have Ter Stegen as one of my favorites because after what 2019, 2018, that like those games, it's been really hard to go and support Ter Stegen. And
Hmm.
so I ask you just this question because we were talking about his attitude, we're talking about some of the off the field issues. Let's talk about the on the field because if Ter Stegen, let's say, were to recover, he recovered from his injury, would you still be giving him a chance next season necessarily, or would you be in agreement with what Barcelona they are doing and going after Joan Garcia?
I am in full agreement. I'm actually super excited that John Garcia joined Barcelona. This is a position where, for the longest time, I've watched Barcelona for a long, long time, and for the longest time, we really haven't upgraded at this position. And I
Yeah.
never felt. Actually, I think it was 2018 when I started like jumping off the bandwagon for Ter Stegen. And actually, before I remember making a TikTok video because I've been making TikTok for longer than I've been YouTube. And
Okay.
my thing was like before Ter Stegen got injured this past season, I was already criticizing him for some of those performances that he was
Yeah.
having. And
Yeah.
then he got injured, and then we all know what happened after that, right? But
Exactly.
the fact that I was criticizing before the season, I don't think that Ter Stegen it's going to be the type of player who, in my opinion, uh, would want to take a second role for Barcelona. I don't know. Do you
No.
think that he would?
Me personally, I don't think so. I think him being at the club for so many years, you touch upon it, a sense of saying, "Hey, I want to be the starter,"
Hmm.
and Hansi Flick is not going to have him as a starter. You saw him start, washed Manuel Neuer, 36-year-old Manuel Neuer in the World
Hmm.
Cup when he was in Germany ahead of Ter Stegen. If Hansi Flick already having a look at Ter Stegen has decided that I don't want to trust you in such a vital position, then I
Yeah.
don't I don't see Ter Stegen changing minds necessarily.
That's the
Uh,
That's the reason why I don't want him at the club anymore, even because I don't think he's going to want to take a secondary role. And in my
yeah.
opinion, like the fact that he's not the team player anymore. He was entitled about the if none of these stories came out, I hear your point about next season, but the fact that those stories did came out though. There's the fact that he didn't want to celebrate, the fact that he didn't want to speak up even though he's a number one captain, the
Hmm.
fact that he wasn't. Look at what Chesney. He even Chesney. I remember Chesney coming out and saying that it's okay if Hansi Flick wants to give him this spot back. I'm okay
Yeah.
with that. I'm
Hmm.
okay if he wants to start Ter Stegen instead of me in the Champions League.
Hmm.
And I think that's it speaks volumes about your personal character and what Hansi Flick wanted. That's the kind of attitude that Hansi Flick is asking for every player, and the fact that we're not getting that from Ter Stegen, let alone his performances. I don't think that his performances are good enough for next season, even to be even a backup, and I don't think he wants to be that. So to me,
Okay.
there's no point in having him next
And,
season.
and not only that, so something we haven't talked about, his wages. It's not going to be cheap keeping Ter Stegen on the bench necessarily.
Yeah.
Juan Garcia, he was earning 300,000 per season at Espanyol.
Hmm.
I'm looking into some of the reports that are circulating around the media. Juan Garcia is going to be on 3 million euros, so somewhere around there. Now a
Hmm.
fraction of what Ter Stegen has earned throughout his Barcelona career, and what he's going to be earning, this upcoming season. He's going to be earning in his contract for 42 million. That's crazy.
Yeah.
Just looking at that and then necessarily, and so looking at how this development has unfolded, how do you see Barcelona resolving this? Because Barcelona, they're going to resolve this somehow, some way. And
Yeah.
I think it's going to get messy. I think there's going to be, lots of toxic reports in the media because Joan Garcia, Hansi Flick has made it clear he's going to be our number one. Says he's going to be number two. How do you see the summer developing?
I think it's going to get super ugly, but I think that Barcelona is going to do the right thing, which is ultimately send him in the way, because I think that he's going to want it for his way in, and Barcelona doesn't want him. So at the end of the day, like the fact that he's leaking that he wants his full contract makes me think he wants to go to war with Barca, and at the end of the day,
Hmm.
he's going to lose because he doesn't have he does, in my opinion, I don't think he has the leverage to force Barca, because one, they already promised John Garcia, so at least John Garcia is going to be the starter next season. I don't have any doubts. So what I do see happening though is that Ter Stegen is going to see like how far he can take this, but he can't take it that far because there's a World Cup next season, next year,
No.
next summer. There's a World Cup, and he's going to want to be a starter for somebody. So at the end of the day, like clubs are going to listen, in Galatasaray and Manchester United. Who knows what
AC
others are going to.
Milan.
AC
AC Milan.
Milan, they're gonna come knocking on the door and offer him a project where he can start. And right now, I understand that he can be upset because he doesn't want to lose his spot for getting injured, and he's probably leaking this stuff out of anger and out of just frustration. But ultimately, being on a war with Barca when there's a World Cup coming up, I don't think is the healthiest thing for either club, for Barca or for Ter Stegen. But Ter Stegen, he can say, "Look, I'm staying," and then Barcelona can say, "Well, you know what? That means now we have four goalkeepers, and you're gonna be on the bench as long as you're okay with just being on the bench and
Yeah.
not play." You remember what Flick did with Peña. I don't know what happened. I'm still waiting for that story because some way somehow Flick stopped playing Peña, and I have a theory that Peña must have been upset with Flick, and Flick didn't like it because he basically put him in the doghouse.
Do you think it's just a matter of fact, just Chesney was just better? Do you think it's that necessarily? Because I know Nicky Pena, he wasn't performing bad. I think Nicky Pena,
Yeah,
he did a solid job. He did a good
exactly.
job. But what I think that what changed for Hansi Flick is that leadership, that X factor, that saying, hey,
Hmm.
this guy has been around the block. This guy has been able to bench Buffon. This guy's been able to bench, Alisson at Roma necessarily. This is a veteran in that position. And I just think it went that way. I don't think necessarily it was something toxic with Iñaki Peña, and I understand why Iñaki Peña was frustrated because you're doing things well. You didn't do anything bad. You came off of a 4-0 win against Real Madrid. You're thinking, hey, I had a key save against Mbappe. Why am I being benched?
Hmm.
It's difficult to understand. And in regards to Iñaki Peña, obviously I would say he's a good backup, but Iñaki Peña, he's made it clear. I think he's going to be wanting to have a starting role, and I don't blame him. I wish him all the very best. To whichever club he goes, and hopefully he is able to succeed. But going back to Ter Stegen, I think it's going to be an ugly end to this whole thing.
I think so too. So I want to move on real quick, and now I want to get your thoughts on Lamine Yamal because
Okay.
honestly, I do think that I don't know, like what are your thoughts on his performance in the in the Nations League against arguably the best left back.
Yeah.
Nuno Mendes was just incredible in that game,
No.
and I think that he won for some parts of that game. He looked like he like at the beginning he looked good. He actually had a couple of dribbles, cut inside, gets a
Mm-hmm.
free kick. But I don't know if something happened on that play, but it looked like he didn't want to dribble or even try to go dribble
Yeah.
past Nuno Mendes.
I was looking at I was watching the final, and I was looking at specifically at Lamine Yamal, and I was looking at his performance, and just every single time he got the ball, he was so passive with it.
Yeah,
He
I've
didn't
never seen
show.
it.
Exactly. I've never seen a performance like that from Lamine Yamal where he isn't actively trying, to go 1v1 against Nuno Mendes. And it's not like Lamine Yamal hasn't done this. Lamine Yamal last season against PSG, you think he had more confidence. He was going after Nuno Mendes.
Yeah, yeah.
Even though he was older, he was even getting the better of Nuno Mendes. And so, I don't want to look too deep into this. It was just simply, hey, Nuno Mendes had a great performance, man of the match in the final. Lamine Yamal, he had a bad game. Simple as that. And I think that what a lot of people are doing is they've been looking to hate on Lamine Yamal.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah.
He's been absolutely outstanding this season. When you think about it, this is his first real bad game. Throughout the entirety of the season, where you can think, hey, he wasn't up to par necessarily in sort of a big game, and people have been waiting for that. In the games against Inter, in the games against Real Madrid, in the game against Bayern, in the games against Atalanta, Borussia Dortmund necessarily. Lamine Yamal has been absolutely fantastic.
Yeah,
And it's just they were having the draft saved up, and on top of that, when some of his quotes get thrown out of context,
yeah,
it's easy to have toxicity and rampage
yeah.
go wild.
What do you
And
make of his IG post though? He said they complain about the bad ones, but they abuse the good ones, and then he
yeah,
posted this picture.
I I mean, Lamine Yamal knows what he's doing. Like he also plays into it a little bit.
Yeah.
I think that's perfectly fine. Necessarily, I don't mind it. And at the same time, I don't necessarily mind. For example, when Lamine Yamal receives necessarily some criticism. Hey, if you're gonna be posting stuff on social media, I see perfectly normal for people to respond back. I think that's something normal. When you talk, people are going to take it, but to the point where some people are taking it, I think has been absolutely crazy. I think that's just hatred that's been building throughout the entirety of the season
Yeah,
necessarily.
too so much is given, so much is asked, right? Like we
Yeah.
asked Lamine Yamal to go out, and actually, yeah, he. I don't have a problem with people criticizing him. I just don't like it when it goes over the top, like when
Exactly.
there's when you see the chiringuitos of the world posting, and then what Guti was saying about Lamine Yamal wearing his hat on backwards, and
Like
that
what?
it's ludicrous, and the fact that they go out and out of the way, they were basically waiting for this kid to fail once so they can all come in and storming, but they don't realize this kind of pressure, that only pressure that came with Lionel Messi, that's the kind of pressure that came with Cristiano Ronaldo. I don't
Yeah.
even think Neymar got this kind of pressure. So that only speaks volumes of the kind of player and the kind of prospect and the kind of the just the fact that he's only 17, right? And we are right here talking about him losing instead of Spain losing, and nobody's talking, dude.
Yeah.
Morata needs to go buy Lamine Yamal like a Rolex watch or something, because nobody's
buy
talking about him, bro.
hey, buy him a Porsche, buy him a new car necessarily. Like everyone knew that he was gonna miss that penalty. Walking up with no, funny enough,
Everybody knew it,
I
dude.
was scrolling on X, and I was looking at a compilation of the penalties that Aaron Morata has taken. I think out of 14, he scored half of them. That is horrible
He
for
didn't
a
even have
striker
the
to have fifty
confidence to
percent.
take it, bro.
No,
I
no.
didn't even see, dude. I told my wife he's gonna miss it. I saw somebody tweeted. I think it was Mario. I can't remember who that was, but
Hmm.
they said that Morata, as soon as he came in on the field, he said he was gonna miss the PK. Like everyone knew it, dude. He had no confidence, and then he goes out and steps on it and just doesn't even
Yeah.
try to like. Dude, and then he misses it, just like, of course, right? And then what? Now it's Lamine Yamal's fault because what? No, this kid Dean Housen, he played a great game. Like he had a great game against Portugal, but he did make the mistake twice on that second goal
No.
from Ronaldo. First, he leaves him on side by like at least 2 yards, bro. Like everybody was pushed up. He
No.
was the only one that was at least 2 yards, and Cristiano Ronaldo was barely on side on that play. So had it been like maybe just a couple of inches, Cristiano
No.
Ronaldo is offside.
No.
And not only that, but then he loses track of him when there's the cross. He loses track of that play, and then
No.
Cucurella doesn't have the sizing, and he tries to cover, but he can't get there. And then ultimately, Cristiano Ronaldo, right? That's what he knows how to do best, being in the
No.
right spot at the right time, and ultimately, gets that goal, and then propels Portugal, and Portugal ends up winning it. And then De La Fuente is a totally different story, but I do think
Hmm.
that there's so many other things you can point at, and all we are looking at is a kid, a 17-year-old kid who had not even the worst game, dude. He had like a 7.8. The
Yeah.
first goal was Lamine. He was the one who was making things happen on that goal too. So at the same time, it's like, okay, you're talking about him like he had like a 6 point or like a 5.0 or something like that.
Hmm. No, what's crazy is that, guys, we have to realize Lamine Yamal is not an adult. He's a minor. He can't have a driver's license. He can't drink alcohol. He's a kid. He's supposed to be in high school, in his final year in high school, enjoying it, laughing it up. And he's out here, playing at the highest level of football, in finals necessarily. And in regards to his performance, he can have a bad game. It's completely
Yeah.
understandable. He had a bad game. It happens. It happens to literally the best of the best. It's normal. It comes with it. Just it's a matter of looking for an opportunity to bash him, because when you look at Barcelona's season, when you
Yeah.
look at his numbers, when you look at how well he's been performing throughout the season, they had nothing. They had nothing to go around, and this is the one instance where I would say they had some ammunition to fire back.
Yeah, and to me, I think that as far as Lamine, like I understand, like some of those posts are going to bring a lot of hate, and some of those posts, like some people think he's arrogant. I don't think he's arrogant. Like I've seen Cristiano Ronaldo. Like I know what arrogant is. Like I know
Oh, of
I've
course.
seen Zlatan Ibrahimovic. Like I know what arrogant is, and like saying you're the best player in the world and that nobody is the same level as you are. I think that is being arrogant. There's not even once where Lamine Yamal, he'll post something like he's a Super Saiyan on IG, or he'll post
Yeah.
saying that he's born for this and he's coming for this, but I've never seen him being really arrogant, like saying, "Oh,
Hmm.
did you see that interview where they were asking him about the Ballon d'Or, and he said,
Of
like,
course.
I think it's supposed to win like the best player of the year,
Yeah.
not for one game." And he's like, "Well, but if you because that guy kept going and kept asking, he's like, well, okay, if you guys want to play for the Ballon d'Or, we can play
Yeah.
for it." And then he goes and balls out.
Yeah.
Like, and that's the thing with me. Like, he doesn't. The guy was trying to get him to say that he's the best player in the world because
Hmm.
Cristiano Ronaldo got a lot of pushback for saying that, and he's like, "Well, I'm not going to say that." and he just like basically I'll just give I would give my vote to the best player, and he
Hmm.
just didn't want to say at the end of the day I don't think that's arrogance.
No, no, I absolutely. In that media, a lot of people took that last sentence out of context, and then they were specifically, trying to, twist the words of Lamine Yamal and say, "Hey, he said the Balon d'Or is decided on the Nations League," which is that's not what he said whatsoever. He was
Hmm.
saying the best player should be awarded the Balon d'Or for his performances throughout the entirety of the season, not for this specific game. But if you want to play like that, then fine. I'll play for it, and
Hmm.
that's where people, they were taking words out of context, and even in his words for Cristiano Ronaldo and everything. Even then, it's just people that are going to be looking to take advantage of the situation, grab some words out of context, and
Yeah.
just go viral on social media and everything. And I think Lamine Yamal, he's actually been smart with the approach. He's been actually very grounded. I agree with your statements in regards to his attitude. I think he's actually been grounded. He has that confidence where it says, "Hey, if you're going to be
Sì,
talking,
io
then
creo lo della
I'm
Mino
going to be
para
able
me.
to talk back," but it's
Hmm.
not been I would say a place where it comes of arrogance necessarily. I see him as confident.
Yeah.
I've never seen him say, "I'm the best player in the world." You're not at my level. No.
Did you see the video with Fabrizio Romano? I'm
Es
gonna
de
show
otro
it right
nivel.
now.
Hay muchos de nivel súper, como claro, Mbappé, Haaland, pero lo que te da Lamine, aparte de esto de la edad, para mí es increíble.
¿Tú consideras que es el próximo Balón de Oro?
Yo creo que sí.
Sí.
Yo creo que sí. Porque hablando también con compañeros periodistas, creo que la magia que te da Lamine hoy no te la da otro jugador.
So, what do you make of what Fabrizio Romano? I'm assuming you speak fluent
Yeah.
Spanish, so
Well, I mean, it's not only the opinion of Fabrizio Romano. That's the opinion of many legends. Many legends in the world of football say basically the same thing that Fabrizio says right there. Lamine Yamal, the ability that he's able to have, on the ball, the magic that he's able to create, no other player in football can create that as of right now. No player can give you that sensation where as soon as he gets the ball, you stand up. I was looking at videos on X, and every single time he got the ball, people were standing up. It's that same sensation of when Messi got the ball, when you knew something was going to happen. You're looking out, everyone moves. It's that same sensation. And I don't know if he's going to win the Ballon d'Or this year, but he's going to be winning many. He's going to be winning many in these next upcoming years.
yeah. To me, I
And he's
think it
just
was. I think it was.
generational talent.
I think it was really telling though that a kind of a journalist, right, came out and said what he said, because we need to put context into this, because journalists ultimately are the ones who have a lot of votes for the
Hmm.
Ballon d'Or. So to me, it's not the same as in, like, for example, Casillas will say that, or if PK will come out and say that. The fact that Fabricio Romano came out and said what he said makes
Hmm.
me think that Lamine may have a much better chance than we think, because if even Fabricio Romano said that he's spoken to many of his friends and his colleagues, and everybody's kind of like on the same bus, where like thinking, well, Lamine is the best player in the world, so he should get the vote. But I'm thinking like, okay, so there's another case for other players in PSG. Like I was mentioning this with Omar, and I was telling him that how Vitinha will now have a better case with the Ballon d'Or as well, and now Nuno Mendes, after having that kind of performance in the Nations League, against a team where Dembele couldn't do that. That Dembele played against the same team, and Nuno Mendes was a monster on that game, and
Hmm.
now he's gonna have a case for Ballon d'Or. So there may be some votes taken away. We've seen this happen to Vinicius Jr. with Jude Bellingham. Ultimately, do you think that Lamine Yamal has? What kind of a chance do you give him to win the Ballon d'Or?
I think he has a good chance, but what I think is going to hurt against him is not being able to contest that Club World Cup, because a lot of people, they vote based on what they remember, last. If let's say PSG go far in that tournament, let's say Dembele, is able to have a nice little run there, people are going to remember what just happened, what recently happened, and they're not going to be thinking what happened throughout the entirety of the season. And one thing that makes me really sad is, for example, is how overlooked Rafinha is necessarily. That I give you a prime example.
Yeah.
Rafinha, his season, he matched the all-time goal contributions in the UCL. Why is that not being talked about more? Why was he not given, the best UEFA Player of the Season award necessarily? That's just an example,
Yeah.
because Rafinha wasn't, I would say, let's say, creating the same magic that Lamine Yamal was having, but he contributed the same in over the two legs. He scored the third goal in the equalizer in the first leg, and he scored the third goal, before they equalized in the second leg. He was involved in both games. He was involved in so many clutch games throughout the entirety of the season. And I would say, me personally, when I genuinely look at it, I could even say Rafinha has an even better chance for that Balon d'Or. But it's because of that. It's because, that recency bias. You think, hey, what is the most recent thing that has gone on into my mind? And so Lamine Yamal, I think he does has a chance because he's the best player in the world. But not being able to play the Club World Cup, I think it could harm him.
Yeah, guys, there's 22 of you guys. Please like the stream. Please, guys, comment your thoughts. And I want to ask you something here on the chat. It says, between Haaland, Isak, and Julian, who are most likely to get it in your opinion? That we are most likely to get. What would you say to that?
Oh, and in regards to all three are top strikers. All three, I'm a huge fan. I've seen Haaland over the years at Man City. Isak, I've seen clips of him at Newcastle. I've seen some of his performances. Julian, I've seen a ton of him. Obviously, I'm a supporter of the Argentine national team. My family's from there, and so I've seen years of him. All three would be very expensive. That's the thing. My favorite, I'm looking between Isak and Julian. I think they can give you most in an overall game necessarily. Julian, you're thinking of him playing as a secondary striker. He could be your primary striker, but he'd be very mobile. He'd be sort of like the David Villa-esque role necessarily. Isak, brilliant. You don't think a player that tall is going to be that technical and then that skillful on the ball, but he somehow is. Able to weave around and generate space. He's an absolutely fantastic striker, and obviously Haaland, he's there for the numbers. He's just if you give him service, he's going to give you 30, 40 goals a season. Simple as that. But when you look at a striker who can play at Barcelona, you want more than that. You want more than that. But looking at Hansi Flick's system, who can genuinely fit the best? Potentially Julian.
Yeah, Julian is definitely. I have a witness for Julian. I saw him ever since that 2022 World Cup, and Pep Guardiola still decided not to give him a more important role with Manchester City. I thought it's one of the all-time screw-ups from Pep Guardiola, to be honest with you. And I think time really proved that point after we all seen him at Atletico Madrid, which is a defensive team. Let's be honest. Julian Alvarez on an offensive team, he's a totally different player, and I think that he's doing such a great job right now. But if I have to, in my opinion, like I would definitely bring. I think any of these three players are outstanding. Any of these players, you can't go wrong with this kind of talent. This is like you splitting hairs, right? So to me, I think the player that I would say that so if we let's say we didn't have. Let's say we didn't have Rafinha, right, and we had Nico Williams, right, on the left. I would say the best player to have it's Haaland, because he'll just score every single, like you guys can beat the dribbles on the wings, and he'll just score every single chance. But I do think that having Rafinha, I would say that probably Isak gives you much more versatility. It offers you more of those dribble present. He has more dribble abilities. Julian, I do like your point when you said Julian kind of like a David Villa, because I think Julian will play much better in a 4-4-2, and Barcelona doesn't play the 4-4-2. So I think he's much better as like kind of like that secondary striker, though. I do agree with that, because he does even though like we have seen Julian play really great as a number one striker. The only problem is he kind of loses that box presence. He's not that tall, so we don't have that kind of like box to box kind of player. But at the end of the day, like these players are all great. They're all really good, and to me, I think any of them will be great. So going back to that point, to your point with Rafinha, dude, what I do want to say real quick is, I know he's been really underrated towards that Balon d'Or conversation. I think we as fans have established that he doesn't have a chance to win it because when we needed him the most, like Rafinha is the type of player who can't. Sometimes he won't have a great game, but he'll get 2 assists.
Yeah.
Like he didn't have a good game, but he gets a goal or he
Yeah.
gets a goal and an assist. So he's a stat monster. Like Rafinha this season was incredible. I don't know if we can replicate that next season. I hope
Hmm.
we can, but I think that's kind of something that plays up against him when we were needing him when it came down to Inter Milan. He did score that goal. Okay, that's the perfect game for Rafinha. Like he didn't do much throughout the game against me, throughout the tie against Milan, but he scores a 3-2 goal and gets the numbers. But at the end of the day, like we were asking him to do a little bit more, and I think ultimately that's what's kind of hurting him towards that Ballon d'Or conversation.
Okay.
Yeah, so there's opinions on Nico Williams to Bayern. I'll say something real quick, and I'll ask you your opinion. So
Yeah.
so now the story that came out that he's asking what 20 mil, and on top of that you're supposed to pay the release clause, which is 60 million. So that's 80 million dollars, euros for Nico Williams. I think this is one of the reasons. Again, we go back to the same thing with Deco not getting credit. And it may not be that we're leaking stuff about Luis Diaz, or it may not, or everybody wants to hear that Barca is after Nico, right? That's the thing that Barca Nation wants to know. It's like, why are we not going after Nico? Well, the story is coming out now. That's probably why, because he is just too expensive and his demands are pretty high. And he sees Rafinha on the left wing and says, like, well, where am I going to play at? What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, in regards to Nico Williams, the whole Luis Diaz debate, the reason why Barcelona are going too crazy over Nico Williams is because of those wages.
Yeah.
Hey, he's on a very, very good salary on at Athletic Club, because they didn't have to pay a transfer fee to get him.
Mm-hmm.
He's part of the club. He's one of their best players. Of course, he's going to be earning relatively well. Athletic Club, they're one of I believe the only clubs in Europe that have a transfer policy like that, where they don't poach players from abroad necessarily, so they don't have to spend money on transfer fee, meaning they pay their players really, really well to stay.
Mm-hmm.
And Barcelona, I would say they're not necessarily doing bad going after Luis Diaz. I think Luis Diaz is the type of profile of winger that we do need at the club. But the
Mm-hmm.
problem is the price tag. The problem
Exactly.
is that he's not worth 80 million euros. If he's half of that, I'm looking to say, hey, where do I sign? He'd be a great opportunity. But when you look at Luis Diaz for 80 million euros, keeping in mind that he's getting close to 30. That's where you're thinking,
Mm-hmm.
if you pay the same amount of money for a Nico Williams, much younger, already
Yeah.
experienced in La Liga, friends with the Barca boys, then it can be a much better opportunity. But then you look at those wages and you're thinking, oh my God, how are we gonna how are we gonna sort this out?
Yeah.
And so Deco's job isn't easy. I think what's going to happen, that's basically going to blow that left winger situation or debate up, is what happens with our outgoings. What's going to happen with your Ansu Fatis? So what's going to happen with his salary? If we have Ter Stegen leaving, that's going to be huge wages off of the bill, off the
Yeah.
wage bill. Lenglet, he recently joined Atletico Madrid.
Yeah.
Absolutely fantastic to have his wages off. Let's see how much FFP space we can generate, and see how we can
Yeah.
make either of those two signings work. Because what's clear is that we need a left winger for next season. I don't think that Barcelona can go into next season without one.
Exactly. And I'm glad you mentioned Luis Diaz. Did you see that goal against Argentina?
Yeah.
That was dirty. That was dirty. That was good. That was good. So that he was making his point. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, I see you. I see you. No, so look, my thing with Luis Diaz is I've seen him play. So he's a South American. Of course, I've seen plenty of Luis Diaz. I think he comes into this team and automatically, instantly makes the team good. Like he doesn't have to adapt that much. Like, but my problem has always been the price. So
Yeah.
like it came out that the last thing I've heard, because there's a lot of rumors, a ton of rumors that you don't even know what to believe. But apparently now, the story that came out is that Liverpool is willing to let him go for 60. What are your thoughts on 60?
Ooh. Oh, 60 is much more enticing. 60 is much more enticing. I think that'd be a little bit more realistic. I think right there you're looking, what's the package deal looking like? Are there going to be add-ons included, for example? If we can make it so sort of like a similar to that of a Danny Olmo situation where you pay maybe like 50 million, 55, and then have some in variables. I think that could be doable. I think what Luis Diaz is 28, 27 around there.
He's 28. He's going
He's
to be
28.
29. I think next season he's going to be 29.
Okay.
So I don't know when
They
his birthday is, but he's supposed to be turning 29. He's definitely 28 right now.
precisely. So he's going to be entering the prime years of his career. It could be a fantastic move for Barcelona. I think he'd be able to give a lot. I think that'd be a little bit more enticing, but we have to see if Liverpool are actually open to that. Are they actually open to letting Luis Diaz go for that price tag? Because as you said, you don't know what you could believe in the media right now. Reports are saying Liverpool don't want to negotiate at all. Then you're seeing some reports say Barcelona are confident that they can make this happen for X amount of euros. Some
Yeah.
reports are saying, hey, Luis Diaz is just using Barcelona as a negotiating table so he can extend. Some are saying, hey, he has offers from Saudi, from abroad,
I draw the line at around 50. I know that he may be worth more. He looked incredibly fast. Like he's not past his prime at all. Like
Yeah.
in that game against Argentina, he was a problem. Like
He was.
Argentina has a great defense, and he was having his way with that defense. And that's
Yeah.
kind of what I want to see from a player who is worth that kind of money. But at the same time, it's like I don't want Barca to spend that kind of money, because the one reason why, in my opinion, okay, why I don't think that Luis Diaz makes sense is that, okay, what are we going to do? We have a left winger. If you tell me, let's look at this. Let's look at this comment real quick. It says this goes into what I'm about to say. It says Lookman is a good option, and he's not. He's on big He's not on big wages. So for me, it's like, okay, so Deco, I'm asking Deco, like, what are we doing? Because if we're bringing Luis Diaz, if we didn't have Rafinha, I understand that. Like, I understand that we don't have Rafinha. We need Luis Diaz on the left wing. But if we have Rafinha, why are we getting another player who is going to demand to start? Why are we getting another player that even if he doesn't demand to start, why are we paying 60 million euros for a player that we are going to be rotating, for a player that we are going to be moving? The only reason why I would go for Nico Williams is because I would actually maybe try to move Rafinha on to the number 10, or maybe rotating with Lamine and rotate, because Nico Williams, his age is like 22 years old, 23-year-old player. After the first contract, he's going to be what, 26, 27. We can still sell him for a profit down the road. So you're willing to make changes around your squad. But for a player who is 28, who is going to demand to start, who is going to want to be a protagonist for this team, like Luis Diaz, why are we going after that kind of profile player? To me, Lookman is the player that I've always said, if we want to go for Lookman, that is perfect, because I believe that Lookman will be okay with playing on the second half. Maybe we can sub in Rafinha or move something around and maybe move Rafinha, give Lamine some rest. But I would say a rotational player is really a rotational winger is what Barca needs to go for, not the Luis Diaz of the world who are going to be demanding more of a protagonist role. But what are your thoughts on that?
Okay, that's interesting that you bring that up, because I'm a little bit torn on that, because I see your point. I see your point. You're mentioning Rafinha. You're talking about his importance to the team in that position, but at the same time, I'm thinking, hey, if, for example, if those games against Inter, if we had a Nico Williams necessarily, if we had someone who was a left winger who was causing danger in the 1v1, that tie could have been completely different, because Inter, all they had to do was just say, hey, no Alejandro Balde, perfect. Let's put three players on Lamine Yamal, Barcelona, break us down. And they made things very, very difficult for us. Barcelona, they had a much more difficult time. And that's where I think, hey, Barcelona, they need a left winger. I think it's a mandatory for how Hansi Flick likes to play. Two wingers who like to cause danger on the flanks, direct 1v1. And Luis Diaz, I do see your point. I do see your point. I think he could be demanding to start,
Yeah.
but I ask you, do you think that Luis Diaz and Rafinha could play together? Rafinha at the 10 and Luis Diaz out wide at the left? Because I think that could work.
Yeah, I definitely think that it could work, but my thing is I don't want Barca to make a move that is going to be the same of what Real Madrid did with Mbappe and Vinicius Jr.,
Okay.
where there's two great players and they're both are more comfortable on that same side. I want Barcelona to learn from what Real Madrid did wrong and actually having those two great players on the same side that actually play the same position. And now what I would be asking is like if we didn't have Lewandowski and if we didn't have Ferran, I get the Luis Diaz because Luis Diaz can actually play number nine as well. He actually plays really, really well when he has done it for Colombia before. So like, and he's also like done it for Liverpool a few times. So like, he can actually play the number nine. He's not that bad at it. He's much better on the left wing, but he can play the number nine. So if we didn't have Lewandowski and we don't want to overspend right now on Haaland or things like that, I get it. But to your question, I do think that they can play together because Rafinha is very. I think Rafinha is the type of players who make others better. I think Rafinha is the type of player who is very versatile. He has played the number nine. He has shown that he can adapt to the left wing position, even though he's at his best on the right. But he understands that Lamine is who he is. So like he understands that. So look at what kind of season he had as a left winger, even though he's not. So he has a very great adaptability, for lack of a better word, and I think that they could play really well together. But like I said, I just don't think that Diaz ultimately makes a lot of sense for Barca, just
Okay.
because we need a rotational player. We need somebody. Even if I know Leao is expensive, but even Leao, like if he comes in and I've seen him being okay with playing in the second half, even for Milan. Like if he plays second half for Milan, why wouldn't he want to play for Barca in the second half? Like
Oh.
I don't think he's that kind of like player who demands to start every game, and I've seen it with Milan. So I wouldn't hate it as much, but the price is the problem. So to me,
Mm-hmm.
if you ask me, I would say if I had a magic wand to what I want my favorite team to do, I would sign Lookman or I would go after Sané. If he's not demanding to start, I would ask him. But I think that ultimately Lookman, to me, I think it's a no-brainer just because
Okay.
his wages and just because he would be okay with that rotation with
Okay.
Rafinha, and then we can rotate. If we're rotating Rafinha, he can play on the left, right? If we're rotating Lamine, Rafinha can play on the right, and Lookman can start on the left. So it's just adds a lot more depth than what we have right now, in my opinion.
No, no, that's super interesting. If Barcelona were to go down that route, y- I would be more inclined for Barcelona to sign two options necessarily: signing Ivan Perisic alongside of Lookman, signing Marcus Rashford alongside a I don't know. Son is no longer an option because he just signed with Galatasaray, so we can't go after him. But something along those lines necessarily. I think then with the departures of Pau Victor, with the departures of Ansu Fati, you need
Hmm.
firepower up top. You need firepower up top. You saw that throughout the season. We need more. And if we were to go down that route, I would go for two players. I'd go for a Rashford and a Lookman, a Rashford and Perisic, a Perisic, a Lookman, something like that.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. To me, I'll be honest. To me, the Rashford move, it's the least of my favorites out of all the ones that have been mentioned. But I,
Okay.
I would actually think that Hansi Flick can do things with him. My thing with Rashford is the same thing. It's the same take for me with Leao. I think they're players who have a pretty good ceiling, but they're really inconsistent. And I think the same thing happens to Rashford. I think he's injury prone, and I think his issue's always been his inconsistency. Like he can be really
Okay.
good, or he can be like Leao comes in for Portugal against Spain, and he was unstoppable.
Yeah.
But there's so many other instances when he comes in and he doesn't do anything.
Yeah.
So that's kind of my thing with him. But I'm glad you mentioned Perisic because the rumor has it, right, that Perisic wants to join Barca and that Flick will be interested, and that Barcelona ultimately they are looking into it, right? So I'm just gonna be honest with you and give you my opinion. Like I don't like the fact that my club, even though I'm not against the move with Perisic, but I don't like the fact that Real Madrid is looking for young players, and Barcelona has been linked with old players. Like, this is a move that show me a move from Real Madrid, who have shown to be really great at signing. They're really very, very good at signing, and the front office is
Yeah.
top notch. But I don't remember a move where Real Madrid went and got a player who was really old. They had a chance to go get Sergio Ramos when they really needed a CB, and they didn't go get for Ramos. So those are the things that I don't like about Barca. Like, to me, like, just the fact that I know Perisic can offer some things, but why are we going for a player who is really old, and we there's no hope for the future, and instead of why can't we just save that money and put it towards a younger player? What's your take on Perisic ultimately?
I think in regards to that, you're talking a lot about the finances. I think if Barcelona, they're in a much more healthy position necessarily, where we have, the money to go after a big money move signing necessarily, or a young top talent necessarily. I think Barcelona, they would be doing that. But when you have Rafinha necessarily performing really well, and as you mentioned, we Barcelona, they could be looking at players not necessarily give him competition, but player who can give him rest. Then Perisic would be the perfect option. I understand, he's 36. I understand that he's on the wrong side of 30. But for that specific role, he'd be able to add value. And that's what Barcelona, they're looking for. Cost-effective players who can add value and help Barcelona. Obviously, in an ideal situation, we'd want to sign younger players, and I'm all for it. I want Barcelona to be focusing on in the future. I want them looking at the young talents emerging from South America, emerging from Europe, emerging from Africa, emerging from Asia, North America, all over the world, in order to boost Barcelona. But when we have Barcelona in this limited financial situation where we have to count the money that we spend, it's very difficult. It's very difficult. For example, you just look at the player that Real Madrid they signed in Masantuono. Fantastic talent from Argentina.
Yeah,
I'm thinking, man, if Barcelona had more money, he'd be a player coming to Barca. But
yeah.
I
PSG
think
almost had him. PSG had him on,
Yeah.
but I guess he preferred Real Madrid over PSG. But PSG like offer a really good contract, and I guess Real Madrid like that. These are the things that nobody talks about. Like, Real Madrid, basically, do they play under the same rules as Barcelona? Because they just overspend for every single player. They offer this kid 40 million with another 20 on add-ons, and even PSG was like, I'm not matching that. I'm not even going to compete with that, because PSG thought it was too much. Like, PSG is changing before our very eyes. They didn't overspend for Dewey. They didn't overspend for Dembele. Barcelona should absolutely try to cash in on Dembele. I don't know what we're doing.
Well, in regards to PSG, like I know they didn't break the bank, but they did spend a lot of money on that team.
Yes.
That's one of the things that I just don't agree with. When you look at the amount of money that PSG spent, I think they spent over like 200 million euros in this past year.
Yeah,
That's not a small chunk of change. No, that's serious investment into the team. And I understand that you're not spending big on superstars, but you're still investing a lot of money into the squad necessarily.
No, yeah. No, I agree with that. The only thing I'm saying is, like, PSG, even they thought it was too much. And Real Madrid, bro, like, Real Madrid just keeps getting all these players. They spend
Where's this money
already
coming from?
$1.2 billion, bro. They already spent when they got Jude Bellingham, Tchouaméni. They got so many, like, for example, Mbappe cost a lot of money. They already overspent on Trent Alexander-Arnold. They put another 10 on top of that, and getting this kid Masantuono, getting the Dean Housen kid also. Like, these are a lot of young players, but dude, 250 million already on the market, plus the Masantuono. That's gonna put him up to like what, 300 million for this season, and on top of that, you throw in the 1.2. Like, where, like, do they have some sort of different cap? Like, nobody talks about that kind of stuff. Like, really?
No. I'm looking at these signings happen. And I'm thinking, I'm thinking the same thing as you. Like first, like Barcelona, like what's going on? Fucking pull the lever to sign Joan Garcia. We've been waiting for that for the past like 2 weeks or so. And you see Real Madrid over here signing and everything. At the same time, you appreciate that they're fantastic at making signings, but you're thinking, man.
In Barcelona, dude, like, Barcelona just does their job, right? They go on this season that we're supposed to be on rebuild, and literally sends Real Madrid on rebuild mode because Real Madrid was they're supposed to be all set. But look at what Real Madrid does to match up what La Masia brings to the table. Look at what Real Madrid is doing. They're spending already 300 mil. And the story is they're going to spend another 100 mil on a midfielder. Maybe Enzo, I don't know who that is, but there's going to be a surprise signing. They are not done. I think they have two more signing as from what I'm hearing. But kudos to shout out to La Masia, man. Like the kind of things that Real Madrid has to do to kind of have a competitive team to be able to compete. Obviously, not every single Barcelona player is from La Masia. Like Rafinha is not from La Masia, Pedri is not from La Masia. But you get my point. You get what I'm trying to say. I know Lewandowski is not from La Masia, but the core, it's literally a team that basically comes from La Masia. Where would we be without La Masia like right now?
No, La Masia is literally keeping Barcelona alive because I'm sorry, if La Masia was not there, we wouldn't have Pau Cuarsí, we wouldn't have Alejandro Balde, we wouldn't have Fermin, we wouldn't have Gavi, we wouldn't have Marc Bernal, and we wouldn't have Lamine Yamal. Those are huge players that add so much impact. Those are some of the best players in the world that Barcelona, they're just producing for free. They're just chunking them out like that. And, in Barcelona's, financial situation where we have to count the money that we spend, that's a lifesaver. That's honestly a lifesaver.
I cannot. I don't know about you, man. I cannot wait to see Real Madrid against Barca next season. I just can't wait to see what is it gonna look like. Dude, they have way too many players that they can only play 11 players, bro. Like what are we gonna do? The story just came out. So I posted a video on Mastantuno. I actually really like the kid. He's a stud. He's
good.
He's a world-class talent. He's gonna be great, but I said, well, what about Rodrigo? I in that video, I said, okay, it makes sense, right? So Rodrigo's leaving. So the story now is Rodrigo's actually staying. So what? Rodrigo stays too? Like, and then now you have Mastantuno, now you have Arda Güler, now you have Endrick on top of all the world star players like Mbappe. Like, I get that Real Madrid, they literally have a credit card with no limit. They can go spend whatever they want. Like, what are all these players are going to do? Like, I just don't get it. But I can't wait, dude. Like, I can't wait to play Real Madrid because I'm gonna laugh if Barcelona beats them again after the overspending. They thought they had a team that they can win everything with Mbappe coming in, and now, dude, we beat them 4 times. And now, what are they gonna do if we beat them again next season? It's gonna be insane.
I absolutely can't wait. But I'm really looking forward to this Club World Cup. I genuinely want to see what happens in this Club World Cup with new signings coming in. I want to see how Huijsen he performs for Real Madrid. I think he played phenomenal for Spain. Absolute great center back. Trent, how is it going to look under Xabi Alonso? New system, new coach. How are Real Madrid going to look? I think it's going to be a very important indication. And on top of that, something that isn't talked about. Players aren't getting rest. Those who are attending the Club World Cup. These players are playing consistently every week. That's going to add a lot of fatigue to the legs. Let's see if they're able to bounce back in the summer, because then preseason starts next month.
Exactly. So let's switch on Grimaldo real quick, and that'll be the last topic, and we'll be quick at it. I don't know if you have to run or if you're.
No,
I'm
good.
We usually have like an hour, but what are your thoughts on Grimaldo? Do you think that ultimately he's a player that wants to come into Barca? Because to me, obviously, if he wants to come in for like 15 million, that's a no-brainer to me. But the problem that I have with Grimaldo, in my opinion, is the same thing that I'm saying with like all these other players that are being rumored for Barca. It's like, do they want to come in and be the team player? Do they want to come in and compete? Do they want to come in and be a rotation? Because you have Balde, who has a ceiling of the best player at his position. I know we have Nuno Mendes right now, who just basically a monster right now. But before maybe half the season, we never talk about Nuno Mendes that much. It was all Balde being the best player at his position. So he has that kind of ceiling. So does Grimaldo want to come in and compete with that kind of talent?
In regards to Grimaldo, for 50 million, absolutely fantastic buy. But I don't think it's going to be too much of an issue to keep Gerard Martin if you sign a left winger. I understand that he has limitations. You saw that, in certain games, you saw his limitations being exposed. But in certain types of matches, against your lower tier oppositions, I think he's, the perfect fit. A player who isn't going to make fuss if he isn't going to be playing, player on low wages. I think if you do bring in Maldo, yes, he can be that replacement for Balde when he isn't there. But is he going to demand to start? Is he going to cause issues in the dressing room? That's something that we do not need. That's something that Hansi Flick does not approve of. And of course, you'd have to have Gerard Martin leave. You're not going to have 3 left backs necessarily. And so I think it's dependent on what happens with Gerard Martin's future. You've seen Hansi Flick place his trust in Gerard Martin throughout the season and throughout the campaign. And never I saw him basically lose that trust. And so, although Grimaldo is a great market opportunity, I don't see it happening because of that.
Where do you think ultimately Grimaldo goes, though? Because he is a La Masia player. So he is a player that we know he's been flirting with Real Madrid. We know he's been saying that he will be okay with Real Madrid. Like, he's kind of flirted with Madrid way too many times for a La Masia player. But I do think that, maybe if I don't know if Madrid will do it, but if this Carreras kid doesn't come, or if the Luis Kelly, I guess they're trying to get him too, who knows? But do you see Grimaldo going to Real Madrid?
Oof. I mean, a lot of Barcelona fans, they would be upset if that happens. I don't see it happening. I don't see that happening. But it is a possibility at the end of the day. You can't rule it out. But I view it as unlikely. I think that worst comes to worst, he's just going to be joining another team in La Liga. I don't think he's going to be joining Real Madrid. I don't see it happening.
Yeah, and to be honest with you, I do think, and I'm expecting Gerard Martin not to be part of the squad next season.
Oh, wow. Okay.
I don't think he will be next season, because he's already been linked with, I think there's a Premier League team interested. I think there was another, I don't know if I heard that Roma. I can't remember there was 2 teams that ultimately wanted to get Gerard Martin. So I think that Barcelona is looking into. I know he had somebody asked him, who was that? I can't remember who was asked him I think it was at an airport or at the stadium or something. They asked him about his future, and he just said no. He's with Barca. He wants to play with Barca, but there has been already stories. I think is the what's that team called? Like Wolverhampton or something like that, or I can't.
Wolverhampton.
Wolverhampton. Yeah, I guess they want to get his services. So obviously, I do think that Barcelona has to upgrade at the left back position. Like,
Okay.
I don't think I think that Gerard Martin was really not great with Inter, and we saw what PSG did to Dumfries, and
Of course.
I know Gerard Martin had a game that was out of his life, right? Like, he had 2 assists in the second half, but at the end of the day, like, that guy really cooked Barca. Like, Dumfries was a force. I think he was the player of the match in both games, and it's no coincidence that it was up against Gerard Martin, basically the second runner-up on that left back position. If that doesn't scream that you need to upgrade, I don't know what does, whether we have to go Grimaldo or something else. But Gerard Martin is going to be okay for the most part, but if Balde gets injured in crunch time against a team where you really need somebody who it's at a better level, Gerard Martin is not going to give you that.
Okay. I mean that's valid. That's valid. You see him struggle against Dumfries. Dumfries really had his way with him in those 2 matches. I understand what people say he's not good enough. I agree with that sentiment. I just think that, for example, that we just need to reinforce other positions, and I see them as more priority than that left back. But of course, let's say Barcelona had 200 million euros. You buy a left winger, and then you solve your fullback problems necessarily.
Yeah. I want to. Somebody here said, "Would you take Luis Enrique back to Barcelona if Flick retires?" So that's the caveat. So, what would you say to that?
Me personally, I think he's had his story here. I'm not really a big fan of coaches coming back necessarily because they've already done so much at the club. You know, if Luis Enrique he comes and he isn't able to replicate that same success, then a lot of fans they're going to be bashing him. They're going to be bashing him. He's going to be at Barcelona. It's a super high pressure job to have, and so I'm much more of the mindset. Hey, you've created history at the club. It was super successful. You know, what that chapter has closed. We move on from there. And of course, I'm super happy that Luis Enrique he won that the treble with PSG. I think he genuinely deserved it after all the things he went through. Of course, but I'm not really in favor of it.
Yeah, I actually do like him. I think when he left I think it was a couple of issues that he had, but one of the issues was I think it was if I'm not wrong, I think it was Neymar. With Neymar, there was a few problems that happened behind doors and things like that. I don't know exactly the reason, but I actually remember not wanting him to leave when he left. So I personally wouldn't care like if he comes back. I think he's a great coach. He's a great manager. I think he has proven like now he's won trebles with Barcelona. He won treble with a team like PSG, who was thought of as they always flop in the Champions League, right? They're always overspent and they're never good enough to win a Champions League. And there he goes and wins the Champions League with them. So he does have that repertoire of like he knows how to win a Champions League. So I think with Barcelona, I personally don't think that it would be a bad move. This person says Jurgen Klopp. Yeah, Jurgen Klopp, it's as good as he gets as a manager. I just don't think he wants to come back and coach. What are your thoughts on Jurgen Klopp?
No, I completely agree. I think your club is absolutely fantastic. The impact that he's able to have in a team. You saw what he did with Liverpool. You saw the history that he was able to create in Dortmund. But I think he's burnt out. I think he's burnt out after that spell. I think right now he's perfectly fine in vacation. He's happy there, and he's just going to be sailing off into the sunset.
Yeah, this is why is Xavi Alonso trying to coach in ways of tiki taka. Barca fan, get your popcorns. What are your thoughts on Xavi Alonso, real quick? That we're about to end the stream. But what are your thoughts on Xavi Alonso? Do you think that we should be worried about it? Do you think that this Real Madrid team that's coming into next season? I know I Carnage was here on this chat, so I've heard a few things about his videos and whatnot, and from what I've heard from him, he is expecting 2 titles next season. Do you ultimately think that we should fear that Real Madrid next season is back and that they're going to win 2 titles next season?
I think we have to see how they perform at the Global Cup. I think we just have to see how the system of the Xavi Alonso is going to look like, because the way that he was able to coach Bayer Leverkusen is completely different to how he's going to coach Real Madrid.
Is it going to be good enough competition, though? That's my question with the Club World Cup, because there's going to be a lot of Mbappe 4 goals up against probably Inter Miami.
Somebody
like that.
I mean, when they get deep into the competition, you're gonna have those teams knocked out. I don't see your Inter Miami, your Al Hilal's, those sort of teams
The
going
Boca
deep into
Boca
Juniors. Exactly. I don't see those teams going deep into the competition. You have your Bayerns, you have your PSGs, you have your Chelseas, etc. Your Man City. I think there you can see a much more competitive game. And that's what we're going to see Xabi Alonso necessarily. I just want to see how the system is going to look like. I want to see how, the players are going to work under him, because it's going to be completely different under him than it was under Carlo Ancelotti.
Yeah, I mean, to me, I think that the only reason why I'm not so worried about Xavi Alonso is that I actually think that Ancelotti is a great manager. So I don't think that it was because of a manager problem. It was more of a team. They got a lot of injuries. I expect Real Madrid to bounce back, because that's just really what they do. They don't sit on their laurels, and when they see that Barcelona is creating something great, and this Barcelona team is the youngest team to win a La Liga title in 25 years. So Barcelona next season, they're only going to get older. They're only gonna get more experience. So Barcelona, Real Madrid is not a team who is just gonna sit on the rules and just kind of like do what they're doing right now. And honestly, I think that Real Madrid next season they're at least gonna win one title. I don't know if they're gonna win two, but I think one title definitely.
Okay, okay. Let's see how Real Madrid do. Hopefully, it's another trophy this season. Let's have our fingers crossed for that, and let's hope Barcelona will have tons of success.
Yeah. So I think we're gonna end the stream. Everybody who's in the chat, I appreciate you all. And guys, go subscribe to Elias Kulet podcast. And also guys, like the stream before you go. That would really help us out to push it to more people. And Elias, any last words, man?
Well, yes. First, thank you for having me. Absolutely enjoyed my stay here. Always fun to talk about Barcelona with you. And guys, as Miguel said, all my contact information is Kool-Aid Podcast. If you guys want to go over there and check me out, feel free. I also post Barcelona content. And, once again, thank you for having me.
Yeah. And we're gonna be doing more streams. I want to start like a C once a week once we get closer to the season. So we're gonna have plenty of content for you guys. So make sure you subscribe to the channels. Make sure you guys are here in the chat every time we stream. That helps us and keeps us motivated. And guys, we'll catch you guys on the next video. Thank you, Elia.